this segment, we'll go through some of the essentials that an executive really should know about Napa Valley wines. And when we say essentials, what are we referring to? Executive essentials. Well, it's important that you know the grapes for a given region. That's one. It's also important to know the flavors and aromas from a particular wine from a given region. Also very important. Thirdly, how do I pair that wine with food, or how do I pair food with that region's wine? This is also important to know, especially in a client context or an executive context. And fourthly, what are the bottles that are iconic, the bottles you really should know, the bottles that on a wine list you should recognize, or if someone orders them, you should understand what they've ordered or who the winemaker is. Now, shifting into Napa Valley in particular, some of the essentials about Napa Valley. For starters, Napa Valley was known initially for putting out a lot of Merlot. So in earlier days, this is not so much the case today, but in earlier days, Napa Valley put out a lot of Merlot, and a lot of it was cheap, so it wasn't always the best Merlot. They've since shifted, and now they're a bit more known for having extremely high-quality Cabernet. So on an international scale, California's Cabernets, and some of them known as cult Cabernets, for example, their Cabernets are known as being very high quality, and they can rival the best of Bordeaux. Right? Bordeaux is a region known for its Cabernet. It's where Cabernet the grape is from, actually. California is in constant competition to try to best Bordeaux, to try to compete with Bordeaux Cabernets. What's also a bit more unique to California is the big Zinfandels. So Zinfandel is a red grape. Many thought for a while it was indigenous to California. It's actually not. This grape, but it does very well in California. And it's associated with California, so big red Zinfandel wines. And then lastly, oaky Chardonnay. California makes Chardonnay very well. It grows well, but it's also a particular style of Chardonnay where it spends time on oak and picks up characteristics from the oak. Geographically, where is Napa Valley? Well, Napa Valley is in the state of California in the United States. That's on the west coast. You can see it on the chart. Here you have a very Mediterranean-like climate, not too different from the Mediterranean, near to the ocean, which mitigates the effects of temperature and creates a perfect environment for growing grapes. So the big grapes, you have Merlot, Cabernet, Sauvignon, Zinfandel, as I mentioned, and Chardonnay. So to start with, let's talk about Cabernet. So a lot of California's international reputation is being built on its big Cabernets. What could you expect from Cabernet in the glass? So for Cabernet, for some people, Cabernet is one of the quintessential wines. It's a really big wine, a robust wine. You would expect dark color. You would expect high tannin. And when you smell it on the nose, look for black cherry, currant, and often people associate green bell pepper with Cabernet. Here also look for wood. So sometimes oak, but maybe a deeper scent, more like cedar. Tobacco, sort of like fresh tobacco. Many also pick up vanilla, often a characteristic from spending time on oak. And many also say they pick up mint or even eucalyptus on California Cabernet, or Cabernet generally speaking. So what does Cabernet go well with in terms of pairing it with food? California Cabernet in particular, but really all Cabernet. This is one of the quintessential steak wines. Cabernet certainly goes well with steak. Beef, it also goes well with aged cheeses. Think rich sauces, rich red wine sauces would also be nice with the Cabernet. Herbs that tend to be associated with a roast, so like rosemary, sage, or bay. Cabernet can stand up to these. Its high tannin level also cuts through fat, or let's say the fat that you would have within a ribeye or a steak. Bottles to know. Stag's Leap is certainly one of the Cabernets to know from California. In 1976, there was even a competition that pitted a lot of the big California Cabs and Chardonnays against the Cabernet-driven left bank wines in Bordeaux, or the Bordeaux wines of similar characteristic. And it also pitted some of the California Chardonnays against the Chardonnays in France. And what was interesting is that California came out on top. They did very well. Stag's Leap won over a lot of these first growth Bordeauxs. Now, first growth are the highest echelon, or not they are the highest echelon of Bordeaux. And in a blind tasting where everyone thought California would lose, that wasn't the case. Now, this is dramatized in a movie called Bottle Shock. I think there's probably more drama than, but enough fact that you get the story. But interesting story, and interesting for Stag's Leap, a lot of history. Opus One, again, this is another one. Many people will know this. This is an iconic bottle of the region. Silver Oak, this is another very big Cabernet you may see on the menu. One of my personal favorites. Certainly, you can't go wrong with this. Your clients will definitely appreciate this wine. Very nice wine. Let's switch to Merlot. Now, Merlot is, in terms of its characteristics, a little bit softer than Cabernet. So what can you expect with your glass of Merlot when it comes to the table? Expect dark color. Expect not quite as much tannin as in a Cabernet, but still pretty robust. But the flavor profile might tend toward plum and cherry. A little bit less on the currant side, more tending toward plum, cherry. Think coffee and chocolate in some of the finer Merlots. They get that deep characteristic in some of the bigger and nice Merlots. Also, I'd think vanilla as well. Here, this spends time on oak. Similar process to the process that we use for Cabernet, for example. In terms of pairing, not so different from Cabernet, but maybe when we talk about beef, perhaps not with a steak, perhaps with a hamburger, but the truth is this wine can also stand up to a steak, depending on the style. Merlot can be made in a soft style, or it can be made in a more tannic style and a more robust style. It depends. It can come in both ways. Think red sauces. Think herbs like basil and parsley. A little lighter than some of the things that I've listed for Cabernet in terms of pairing. Wines to know. My favorite, my personal favorite, is Duckhorn. This winery is very well known for its Merlot. Very quality product. You certainly can't go wrong if you see this on the menu. I'd also note that any winery that makes very good Cabernet probably makes good Merlot and vice versa. These are both Bordeaux grapes. They're often blended. If a wine indicates Merlot, it doesn't have to be 100% Merlot. Often they blend with a bit of Cabernet, and that's permissible. Let's talk about Zinfandel now. Zinfandel got a bad rap, or a bad reputation, because people started drinking in the U.S. a lot of white Zinfandel, which is a less expensive, quite sweet blush wine made from the Zinfandel grape, and that's a very different thing. Red Zinfandel is a very big and robust wine, so what can you expect with a red Zinfandel? Red Zinfandel is, you could pair this with anything your Cabernets can go with, and the characteristics are not entirely different. Think raspberry, blackberry. What I pick up on Zinfandel in particular, what's specific to it, is some of the dried fruit characteristics, like raisin or candied fruit. A little bit jammy sometimes, so some are, it smells a little bit like jam. Cedar you could pick up, clove and anise, so it's also spicy, which means it also pairs up well with spicy food, actually. Yep, so Cajun barbecue sauce, now not too spicy, because the truth is it's got a very high alcohol content, and sometimes the high alcohol content can exacerbate the effect of spice. But here, think pepper steak, turkey, black pepper, garlic, really robust flavors would go well with Zinfandel. Garlic, a lot of this would go well with Zinfandel. I like Zinfandel with Thanksgiving. Some like a lighter wine, but I think also because Zinfandel is such an American success story, and how Zinfandel is really characteristic in the U.S. now, that it goes well with a very American meal. But I leave that for you to decide. So which Zinfandels should you choose? Or if you see Zin on the menu, often Zinfandel is referred to as Zin. What should you be buying in terms of bottles? Ridge and Ravenswood, both very reliable producers, both known for their Zin. These two, I think you probably can't go wrong. You won't go wrong if you pick these off of the menu. Moving into the whites, California also produces some world-class Chardonnay. And I talked about a competition in 1976 which pitted our Cabernets, or U.S. Cabernets, against the, let's say, the Bordeaux wines from the same grape. And it also pitted our Chardonnays, U.S. Chardonnays, against Bordeaux Chardonnays. And in this competition, California did very well. In fact, the winning wine in the white category, in the Chardonnay category, was a wine from California. So this brought California onto the scene. And they continue to make very quality wine in Chardonnay. Now, what is California Chardonnay known for? They have a particular way of making Chardonnay. So California tends to have oakier, more buttery, butterscotch-like Chardonnay than what you would see from, let's say, a Chardonnay in other regions of the world, or Chardonnay from France. So Chablis is the region in France that really makes a lot of Chardonnay, very quality Chardonnay. But Chablis tends to be flinty, crisp, clean. California Chardonnay tends to be oaky and sort of butterscotchy because of that time on oak. So in terms of the fruit, expect melon, peach, apricot. These are characteristic of the grape, but also expect that wood to impart the oak and the butterscotch. So food pairings. White meat, of course, so chicken, pork, turkey. Also think seafood, more richer seafood, or seafood that you might be dipping in butter would go very well with a buttery Chardonnay. So crab or lobster. Think cream sauce. Also, again, a little bit. Chardonnay is a big white wine. It's not a delicate white wine. or at least in the California style, it tends not to be so delicate, so it can stand up to a cream sauce. Now, in terms of the bottles to know, what bottle would I know from California? Well, in Chardonnay, the specific bottle in 1976 that won out against the French wines was called Chateau Montelena. So there, I think that's an interesting history. Just like with Cabernet, I would know Stag's Leap. With Chardonnay, I would probably know Montelena, just because of the history behind that. Makes for an interesting story. So to conclude, what are the essentials about from California, those that are specific to California? Well, think early history of lots of Merlot, not always good quality Merlot at the outset, but a lot of Merlot production. Think evolution toward high quality Cabernet, and the term cult Cabernet often used, associated with the California Cabernet. Some of those in smaller production, but very high quality, hard to find, hard to get. Think big Zinfandels. Zinfandel has a really good home in California. Zinfandel is very comfortable in California. Now, Zinfandel, I mentioned it's thought to have been native to California. It's not. For a while, it was thought to also have been native to Italy. It's also grown in Primitivo areas. The Primitivo grape is identical in which is grown in Italy. It turns out the origin is actually in Croatia. Interesting story. But really, what's to know today is that its home today, or its let's say winemaking home, is in California. It's one of the identity grapes for California now. And finally, oaky Chardonnay. Not so much flinty Chardonnay like you would see in France, but oaky, buttery Chardonnay, and a fairly robust for a white wine, robust style from California.